Next provocation. In the early morning of the next day, relatives began to arrive at the estate of the settlement. Joyous exclamations were heard everywhere, children's laughter. Many met their relatives firsthand for many years. But the main thing is that they first met on their own on the tribal land. It was this fact that aroused in all people an unusual, previously unknown sense of involvement in his family. Clan land, his small homeland, and through it, his great involvement with the homeland. The sun was kindly shining, and it was not clear which rays were warmer, coming from the sky or those that came from people who felt their earthly destiny. And suddenly the settlement spread over disturbing news. It was transmitted from estate to estate. A red-haired boy riding a bicycle to a neighbouring village told his parents, "I saw that a military detachment was heading towards our village. I counted them, 33 people, and behind them are a bulldozer and an excavator." "This is another provocation," concluded the father of the boy. "Yes, even on such a day, and even connected the military. Gather, people." Soon, most owners of family estates with their relatives gathered on the road at the entrance to the settlement. The grounds for concern were serious. Thanks to the green books of the series The Ringing Cedars of Russia, the idea of transforming the country through the creation of each family's family estate began to spread in Russian society. To implement this plan on the part of the state, it was necessary to allocate 1 hectare of land to each interested family, for free, and adopt a law on the family estate. But the state was slow with the adoption of the law and the allocation of land. And then many people in different parts of the country began to buy abandoned, overgrown with weeds lands at bargain prices and equip them. But there were forces that stealthily, very thoughtfully, began to disseminate information discrediting these people. The owners of the family estates were called sectarians, extremists. But they didn't call anyone trying to convince officials that these people should be persecuted and stay away from them. In many regions of Russia, officials began to realize that the idea of patrimonial estates is very important for the country and claims to be a national idea. And the President of Russia signed a decree on the allocation of free land in the Far East. And the law of the Belgorod region on patrimonial estates was passed. And the governor of the Belgorod region, Yevgeny Stepanovich Savchenko, from the stage spoke about these people. Yet the dark forces continued to operate. It was clear the group working on the spread of knowingly false rumours, the purpose of which is to prevent positive transformations in Russia. 20 years have passed since the first settlements consisting of patrimonial estates arose, but oppression continued until the demolition of the houses of the creators of the patrimonial estates. Therefore, people thought that the detachment of the military going towards their settlement was another provocation. When the detachment approached the people standing on the road, they parted doomedly, standing on the sidelines on both sides of the road. Silently they looked at the squad going between them. The soldiers looked about 40 to 45 years old. Everything as a selection: athletic physique, in camouflage, field uniform. On the sleeves of maroon berets are the chevrons of the airborne forces. They walked in formation slowly with a strange gait, stepping carefully, almost without raising dust from the dirt road. Judging by the dressing and age, these are not soldiers, these are officers of some elite part of the airborne forces, said one of the people standing on the sidelines. Suddenly the commander, walking slightly ahead, raised his hand. and the formidable detachment of paratroopers stopped. He was stopped by a fragile, short, elderly woman with a figure like that of a young girl. She quickly went to the middle of the road and silently stood in front of the detachment coming towards her. The woman's face was so determined that it seemed she would not give way to a battle tank either. In front of her, a fragile woman held a military tunic with the colonel's epaulettes. The tunic was decorated with many military orders and medals. The squad leader approached the woman, saluted, and began to silently examine the awards. "My name is Raisa Alexandrovna. This is my husband's tunic, Ivan Dmitrievich. He is a veteran of World War II," the woman spoke excitedly. Ivan Dmitrievich was 80 years old when he learned about the wonderful idea of the revival of Russia. He came to this field overgrown with weeds, saw people trying to revive the earth, save it from desolation, and also bought a hectare of land to create a family estate on it for his children and grandchildren. He bought land with his money, with his small savings, which he saved for a funeral. At first he lived in a soldier's tent, mowed weeds, planted trees, and wrote poems about the wonderful future of the country. I met him and admired his confidence in a wonderful future. We got married, built a house, and now our estate is becoming more beautiful every year. Ivan Dmitrievich died recently, and I buried him on our estate. The people you see here are also building their family estates. It all turns out differently, and still, people's desire is good, correct. They need help, and they've been slandered and slandered for 20 years now. Someone is doing this on purpose. You need to investigate who so violently opposes the creation of beautiful oases in our country. And you came here, scare people, equipment comes after you, bulldozer, an excavator. Why did you come? And even on a day when relatives come to every estate. These people have a holiday day, my family day it is called. This day is not just a kind of each of the people, this is a birthday of our country. The future country, the most beautiful in the world. And you, the woman was silent. The paratrooper commander took a piece of paper from his breast pocket and handed it to the woman. It turned out to be a postcard, the same as other invitations to relatives from the creators of the family estates, only slightly wrinkled and with a torn left corner. Raisa Alexandrovna took the card, carefully read the text on it, looked up at the commander and said, "Sorry if I offended you. Come on, I'll show you where to go." Alexandrovna, probably from excitement, was dizzy. She swayed. Commander grabbed the fragile woman in his arms and said, "Come on, thanks for the help, Raisa Androvna." Slender, tall, athletic, the commander walked in front of the detachment of fighters and carried Raisa Alexandrovna as a child in his arms. She clasped her husband's tunic onto her chest with one hand and grabbed the commander's neck with the other, laid her head on his shoulder and seemed to doze off. The morning sun was reflected from the medals on the tunic of a veteran of the Great Patriotic War, and stroked with soft bunnies the courageous face of the commander of the paratrooper detachment, grey strands on his moustache and in his hair. Following the detachment of paratroopers were residents of the settlement and relatives who came to visit them. They did not understand why Raisa Alexandrovna calmed down so quickly, but allowed herself to be held in his arms and even embraced the paratrooper carrying her neck. The whole procession stopped at the entrance to the estate of Svetlana. There was no gate or even a crossbeam. There was just an opening in a green hedge, from which a path led to a change house located on the other side of the site near the forest. Raisa and Alexandrovna stood in the middle of the opening. It was not customary to go further without the consent of the estate owner, and began to call, Sveta, Svetoshka, are you home? Guests have come to you. Come out faster. Soon, from the corner of the house, Svetlana came out. She was dressed in a long dress with embroidery in the Slavic style, with a V.E. Uncom on his head, a can of his signature kvass in her hands. With a quick step, he went along the path leading to the entrance to the estate, reached the middle of the path, and suddenly, as if rooted to the spot, she suddenly saw that at the entrance to her a detachment of soldiers in maroon berets, a crowd of neighbours, and everyone was looking at her. Well then, you got up, Svetoshka. I say, meet the guests. They came to you for our holiday. Don't be afraid, they are good. These are officers of our Russian army, Raisa Alexandrovna encouraged her. Very slowly, Svetlana went up to Raisa Alexandrovna, looked around the military berets in the speckled bearers standing at attention, and said in a choked voice, It is some kind of mistake. They are not for me. I didn't call anyone. Well, why didn't you call? What are you saying, Sveta? I myself saw a card signed by you, a postcard, an invitation to a holiday. To whom did you send? Sent to her classmate, housemate. Well, you see, it means that she sent it all the same. Svetlana peered into the faces of the military standing in front of her. Some looked at Svetlana with admiration, others with genuine interest, others with undisguised love. What happened? Why are they looking at me like that? Who am I to tell them? Who am I to them? What are they for me? Thought confused Svetlana. She did not know that 6 months ago the commander told his fellow soldiers about her, a lonely woman who had acquired a hectare of land and decided to equip her ancestral estate on it in memory of her ancestors and for her future descendants. She created a wonderful project for her future space, the commander said. She alone is trying to realize her project. But not everything can be done by a woman alone, so she asked for help from us. The commander promised to help her because she was not just a woman for him. She was his first, still, school love. And volunteers volunteered to help their commander and the unusual woman. In their free time, they got together and discussed what needs to be done and how to act to implement a project conceived by an extraordinary woman. And everyone wanted to meet their woman with such a meaningful attitude to life. Raisa Alexandrovna asked Sveta, You're Svetlana, when did you last see your classmate? At the school graduation ball. Many years have passed since then. You're no longer a graduate girl in a white apron with bows and pigtails, and your classmate could change. Look carefully, here he is, gestured Raisa Alexandrovna to the commander of the paratroop detachment, standing there 3 steps away from them. Svetlana took several uncertain steps and stood in front of the commander. She carefully studied his face. There was an extraordinary silence around. Even the leaves seemed to stop rustling in the wind. Vanya? Suddenly cried out Svetlana. Vanya's not good, she hesitated. The school nickname of Ivan, who was standing in front of her. He was a stately officer. The crowd, as if holding its breath, exhaled. It finally recognized. That's right, I'm Ivan, your classmate and neighbour. Hello, Svetlana. Hello, Vanya. You therefore have come to me, to my place. Yes, sir, has come. I came to you for 3 days to help you as you requested in your letter. Excited and confused, Svetlana didn't know how to behave further. She handed Ivan a can of kvass. This is kvass. It is delicious. Give it a try. Thank you, Ivan answered. He took a jar of kvass, drank 2 sips, and gave the kvass to the paratroopers in the ranks. And these people, soldiers, are they all with you too? Are they all With me too? Asked Svetlana. Yes, sir. They are my fellow soldiers and friends. I invited them with me because I considered that I wouldn't have time to implement your plan in 3 days alone. What is my plan, Vanya? Svetlana asked perplexedly. Ivan took the officer bag hanging on his side and began to unfasten it. Svetlana recognized this bag. He went to school with it all 10 years, but even more she was surprised when she found out what was inside it. Ivan unzipped the officer's bag and unfolded the tablet in it. Svetlana saw a drawing of her future estate, the same one that the boy Victor drew from her words. The drawing was divided into squares, and each square had its own number. This plan was drawn by a boy who was relaxing in our summer camp. He came to visit me several times. His name was Victor. But how did you get this drawing, Ivan? Svetlana asked in surprise. I report boy Victor is my son, Svetlana. More precisely, the son of my deceased younger brother. Now he is my son. Victor is studying at the Suvorov School. They teach the topography of the area. So he made, at my request, a plan for your future estate. You allow Svetlana to enter my detachment on the territory of your estate, and we will turn... You allow Svetlana to enter my detachment on the territory of your estate, and we will turn into reality your thoughts about the future. Vanya, Svetlana said excitedly. Nothing will work out. I have only 2 shovels. I don't have a tool to work, and dishes to set a table for you, and I have nowhere to sleep for you to lay down. I didn't know that you weren't alone. Please do not worry, Sveta. We have everything. Camping kitchen, tents, sleeping bags, tools. We have everything that is needed for each small square of your future patrimonial estate. Let us enter your estate at your invitation. To come in, according to the invitation? Please come in. Even turned to the detachment and ordered, for the execution of the approved plan for the entrusted squares, disperse. Paratroopers in maroon berets, taking tools with them from a machine standing behind, some at a quick pace, some scattered across a hectare of land overgrown with birches and weeds. Ivan looked around the territory on which his soldiers began to work, took off the radio from his belt and asked, Is the information centre ready for work? That's right, Commander. The information centre is ready for work, said a voice from the walkie-talkie. Settle at the entrance to the estate, Ivan ordered, and added, I am leaving for the 39th square. Divine Diet. A few minutes later, a minibus with tinted windows and an antenna rotating over the roof drove up to the entrance of the estate of Svetlana. The back doors of the minibus opened, and a man in monastic clothing jumped to the ground. He spread his arms to the sides, raised his head up, looked around and said, What a great beauty in your world, Lord. He bowed to the audience and added, Good health to your thoughts, worthy of this world, good people, great co-creators. The monk was young. The rays of light in his light red hair played with the sun, as if the whole body was saturated with energy, and people standing next to him felt the energy going to them, and the youth of the monk could not be hidden by a beard or a moustache. He also had unusually kind grey-blue eyes and a smile on his lips, and for some reason he seemed to everyone cheerful and even mischievous. 2 women from the settlement approached the young monk. One of them said, Bless me, Father. She crossed her hands and held them out in front of her. Usually the clergy put their hand on outstretched hands, and a woman or man kisses it. But the mischievous monk did otherwise. "Thank you for the great status, but I am not a priest yet. I have no children. I can't give a woman a hand for a kiss. This intimate act of temptation will be a great temptation for me." The monk at these words leaned over and kissed the palm of the outstretched female hand. After that, he returned to the car, sat on the floor at the open door, and began to thoughtfully sort out his rosary. Then he closed his eyes and seemed to fall asleep, and the woman remained thoughtfully standing in the same place with her arms crossed. At the open back door of the minibus, people began to gather, especially children. Everyone wanted to see what was inside. The salon of the minibus was filled with some kind of equipment, and a boy, Victor, was sitting at the monitor, drawing a draft of the future settlement of Svetlana. He was recognized by Boris from the settlement Ladno, who was friends with Victor when they rested together in the summer camp. Boris came close to the open door of the minibus and said loudly, "Hello, Victor, what are you doing there?" "Hello, Boris. Hello, everyone," Victor answered joyfully and explained, "I'm communicating with the detachment's fighters with the information center. Well, in general, with a supercomputer in which the information necessary to create such a complex as a family estate is concentrated. But how do other people create their estates without any supercomputers? They have inspiration. They intuitively begin to feel the connection of plants with planets. The soldiers of our detachment still cannot." "Why, the monk is with you." "This is my father's friend and my friend. Now his name is Theodoret, previously called differently. He may appear in different images. He is a metaphysical scientist." "I have not heard something about such a science." "I also know little about it. Theodorite says it is very ancient. The great philosophers Aristotle, Plato, and other thinkers who lived before our era were engaged in it." "Why do you need this antiquity? You have a supercomputer and you are in touch with that." "If the computer cannot solve the problem, Theodorite helps in finding a solution. When my father assembled a squad of experienced paratrooper scouts and they tried to decide what the biocomplex of a family estate should be, one of the officers involved in space reconnaissance said, 'You know, men, I feel our modern spacecraft are children's toys compared to this complex, which we call the family estate. There is no way to do it without metaphysics.' And then my father remembered his friend Theodorite and invited him to a group that is studying the biocomplex of the family estate. He came, listened to their reasoning, and then said, 'I have the impression, gentlemen officers, that you decided to build a channel of communication between God and man.' I did not understand why he said so, and what I said later I also did not understand." Theodorite opened his eyes, looked at Victor and Boris. Then, having looked down, he spoke. "Whatever truth the sage may have stated, with his fishing will be empty when their hearing does not understand the meaning. Forgive me for interfering in your conversation, boys, me. You talked about me with me. Perhaps give me an opportunity to find other words about the topic that interests you. I will try to explain more clearly." "You are honest, Theodorite. Do not be offended. We thought you were sleeping." Victor answered and suggested, "You better tell me in clear words to me and Boris why the family estate can also serve as some kind of communication channel even with God." And in general, why is it so significant for humans? Theodorite closed his eyes and whispered something. Boris heard. Mum, help me find words that make sense clear to people. You know the secret of words that are outwardly simple. With words, you give out inspiration to people. From your words, great creations on earth are accomplished. But I have no creative words. For some time, Theodorite sat with his eyes closed as if listening from space to answer his request. Then he spoke with his pleasant baritone. Tell me, young man, please answer, Boris. What is the sun and what is its purpose? The sun? The sun is the brightest star of our solar system, Boris answered, and having a thought added, as for its purpose, then probably it is to shine and give life to all living things on the earth. Tell me, young man, what the moon is and what its purpose is. The moon is the planet of our solar system, Boris answered, but I don't know its purpose. Perhaps, and I know everything about the moon. A girl of about 7 ran out from the crowd of people standing next to the minibus and jumped in place, joyful. The moon is the planet that made the lunar calendar, and Mum plants tomatoes, cucumbers and flowers on it. Catcher, it was not the moon that made the lunar calendar, but people during long-term observations of the movement of the moon and its effect on plants, the father corrected the girl. Tell me, people are kind, but are there still planets in the universe that affect our life? The life of the plant world and animals, flora and fauna? Theodorite asked another question, already addressing all those gathered. Everyone was silent. The first to speak was Victor, sitting at the computer monitor. I contacted the information centre on this issue. The answer came. It is not confirmed by science. Would you like to read it? Read, came the voices from the crowd. Science does not confirm much. We were told that humanity is only 2,000 years old, and archaeologists are finding settlements that are 30,000 years old. So I read, all plants, whether it is an ordinary blade of grass, a modest wildflower, or a magnificent garden rose, are beautiful in their own way. Otherwise it cannot be. After all, the leader of the plant world is Venus, the planet of love, beauty and harmony, interacting with plants, caring for them, using them for treatment, eating fruits, and even just admiring the flowers, we get the energy of Venus. In addition, each plant has its own controlling planet, which gives them special properties. Plants of the sun personify vital energy and carry a great energy potential. They have a tonic effect. Characteristic features: dry, tall, with a lush crown, flowers yellow or golden, with a faint odour. They grow in open areas where there is a lot of light. Flowers: sunflower, dandelion, peony, cloves, red hyacinth, heliotrope. Healing plants: St. John's wort, mint, calendula, tansy, immortelle, celandine, succession, angelica, mountain arnica, motherwort, valerian. Trees and shrubs: pine, poplar, ash, juniper, mistletoe, orange, walnut, sandalwood. Plants of the moon represent motherhood, childhood, homeland, and the hearth. Characteristic features: juicy with thick stems, faintly coloured leaves, and white flowers with a delicate aroma. They grow in moist places near water bodies. Lunar plants have the ability to absorb disease. Among the plants of the moon, there are many vegetables that normalize water salt metabolism and reproductive function. Flowers: lily, lily of the valley, violet, lotus. Healing plants, calamus, shepherd's bag, plantain, marsh cinquefoil, purslane, watermelon, melon, cabbage. Trees and shrubs, aspen, sea buckthorn, apple tree, white dog rose. There is much more to be written here, said Victor, but I repeat, this is not confirmed by science. I suppose why the scientific world cannot confirm the influence of distant planets on everything living on Earth, Boris entered into a conversation. The speed of light is approximately 300,000 kilometers per second. Even from the sun to the Earth, the light pulse will move for 8 minutes. I've calculated it on my phone on a calculator. The reflected light of the sun from the nearest planets of our solar system will move 3 times longer. The light of distant planets will reach Earth in tens or hundreds of years. During this time, many plants and various organisms will simply die. Although I myself am intuitively convinced the planets interact with the Earth in some other way, it's just that the influence of the light of the sun is obvious to all people living on Earth, children, adults, and scientists. And the influence of other planets is less noticeable, but it is, and evidence can be given. The light of the sun is reflected from the planets, possibly changing its spectrum at the same time. Reflected light may have a slightly different effect than direct sunlight, but this does not mean the effect is less significant. Thank you, Boris. You made a good argument, and in general, the evidence you can say is scientific. Theodorite remarked and added, turning to Victor. And what does the information centre say about the ways of communicating with the Earth of distant planets? Victor didn't answer the question. He sat without taking his eyes off the monitor and was silent. Boris called after a short pause, Victor, why aren't you answering? Can't you hear they're talking to you? Some time passed before Victor turned to the audience and spoke. I hear everything, excuse me, but I was convinced that science would not say anything on the topic we have raised here. Forgive me, Theodorite, that I was sceptical of your claim that the family estate could be a channel of communication with God. But when I read the message from the information centre, I now have a clear picture. You were right, Theodorite. So you read aloud. Bring this information to everyone, Boris asked. Victor began to read. A number of interesting experiments were carried out at the end of the last century by the largest Russian scientist, V.P. Kaznichev, the creator of the Institute of Clinical and Experimental Medicine of the Siberian Academy of Medical Sciences of the USSR. Since the mid-1960s, V.P. Kaznichev and his colleagues have been studying the informational interaction of living organisms. He discovered a previously unknown phenomenon of distant intercellular electromagnetic interactions. Kaznichev's experiments showed that life codes could be brought to Earth through electromagnetic radiation, that is, by energy informational means without direct physical contact. And one more important conclusion, between all living organisms on the planet there is an informational interaction which science cannot explain. In their experiments, Novosibirsk scientists relied on the ideas of the Leningrad astrophysicist Professor N.A. Kozyrev, who proved the existence in space of certain fields that can propagate at speeds much higher than the speed of light. The nature of these fields is unknown, but Kozyrev discovered that aluminium surfaces can reflect them. In the early 1990s, scientists led by Kaznichev produced cylindrical aluminium structures using the effect discovered by Kozyrev. These are tired woks and were called Kozyrev mirrors. Experiments with these facilities have led to sensational results. It turned out that a person placed in the space of Kozyrev's mirrors can see the events of the past, future, and geographically remote present. Academician Kaznashev considered these phenomena to be a reaction of the Earth's information field to the introduction of human thought forms into Kozyrev's mirrors. Experiments were also carried out to transmit thoughts at a distance. A human operator, the so-called donor, who was supposed to mentally give out a certain image to the space, was placed in the inner space of the mirrors. The computer made the choice of the image, so no one knew in advance which image would be selected. In another place, sometimes thousands of kilometers from the donor, the focus of Kozyrev's mirrors, or even without them, was another operator, the recipient, which was supposed to perceive and sketch the information radiated by the donor. The experimental results are as follows. In between 54 to 95% of cases, information was perceived absolutely correctly. Of particular interest were the experiments with Kozyrev's mirrors in the far north, in the polar village of Dixon. Dixon was chosen for the reason that here, along the 73rd parallel, as N.A.E. Kozyrev believed, the so-called zone of the paradoxical passage of time passes, where, under certain conditions, time can change direction. So, on December the 24th, 1990, an ancient symbol known today as the Banner of the World was introduced into the space of Kozyrev's mirrors. The unexplained happened. A plasmoid flashed inside Kozyrev's mirrors, the smell of ozone appeared, magnetic and biolocation anomalies arose, and a luminous disc-shaped object appeared over the building where the experiment was conducted. At this moment, geophysical services on Dixon recorded a strong disturbance of the magneto and ionosphere, and an unusually bright aurora borealis appeared over the village. In a series of 7 experiments, this was repeated 5 times. Within 2 weeks after these experiments, the space of the mirrors was filled with many luminous symbols. More than 80% of them were subsequently attributed to the symbolism of departed terrestrial civilizations. During experiments with Kozyrev's mirrors, the other mysterious facts were discovered. The observer often received thought images transmitted to him with many hours' delay, as if this information had been stored somewhere all this time. But the most striking thing is the effect of anticipating vision. Of the 105 cases of remote reception, 37% of the transmitted images were read by the observer several hours before the session. No one knew what images would be transmitted, but these images were already perceived. This phenomenon was especially pronounced in the far north, in the zone of the paradoxical passage of time. In the early 90s, for the first time in the history of world science, 2 global experiments were carried out. In 1991, the Arctic Circle experiment was conducted. when the transfer of images was carried out from the village of Dixon, and reception was carried out at various points in the CIS. In 1993, the Banner of the World experiment was conducted. The images were broadcast from Novosibirsk and Dixon, and reception was carried out in various geographical locations in Europe, Asia, and America. According to a random computer choice, the donor was offered from 3 to 5 graphic elements from a specially designed table, a graphic alphabet of 77 elements. From these elements, the operator mentally constructed an image which was then transmitted. Information was received in 12 countries of the world. The experiments involved more than 4,500 people. The special role of the far north in the dynamics of the information space of the Earth was proved. According to scientists, the intellectual field has been extremely susceptible to the introduction of thought-like information in the circumpolar region. Ahead, exciting prospects. With the help of Kozyrev's mirrors, people could connect to an invisible and mysterious reality where there is no space and time familiar to us. From this source, one could draw knowledge about the past and future, about the structure of the universe, about other worlds. Research in this area is also being conducted abroad. Modern science is already unthinkable without taking into account the influence of consciousness on the outside world. Consciousness is a great gift given to man. Scientists have already learned a lot in this mysterious area. Nevertheless, the interaction of human thought with planetary cosmic consciousness remains a mystery. And there's a footnote referencing www.old.media.ru/Tajna/magazines/articles/18572. Thank you, Victor, said Theodoret. You interestingly voiced to us a science opinion. Experiments conducted by scientists. But in order not to make mistakes and reassure the soul, it is necessary to determine reality by oneself. Perhaps we will now find evidence of the interaction of all life on Earth with the planets of other solar systems. Let people say those who saw the starry sky did not look at it in fuss. How did you feel looking at the glowing sky? From groups of people, both adults and children, they immediately answered, when I look at the stars in a calm state about something, I think global, but I don't understand what. I think big about something. And when I look, it seems to me that we are not alone on Earth. We all live in a beautiful starry world. And I, said the girl catcher excitedly, when I look at the stars, I want to add my own asterisk, and sometimes not just one. In general, I wanted to draw a starry sky. Now I want to summarize. You have defined yourself, people, when you look at the starry sky. It evokes feelings in you and attracts you to thoughts. It gives great energy to the knowledge and sensation of the entire universe. This is proof of the interaction of people with the planets of the universal systems. This is proof that a person can lead this interaction, because it is worth taking his gaze from the sky to a man to plunge into everyday life and plunge into everyday life, thereby giving a command to the aspiring energies of the universe to stop him. But I have a question, Catchy spoke again. Who made it so all the planets, stars, and sun and moon help each other, and the tree blooms so beautifully? A woman came forward, asking for blessings from Theodorite, and explained to the audience, God created everything, our Father and Creator. I read about it in the Bible, and He created man. We are all His daughters and sons. In the image and likeness of the Father we are created. And here it is. Not everything God created, Catcher objected. A mobile phone, for example, a man came up with it. It turned out to be a very necessary thing for people, and everyone uses a mobile phone. You catch it, are right, Theodorite answered the girl. A lot of people use a mobile phone, but think at your leisure somehow. Perhaps the phone was needed because the person had lost the divine nature given him, the ability to communicate at a distance with each other. So a prosthesis was needed for a person to compensate for the loss. People of different earths, by faith or intuitively, understand the soul. The world around us is a creation of the mind. And we, the people of the earth, are the peak of the creation of the great. Now I'm the main one. I want to ask everyone. We see that each blade of grass, bug, bird and tree has its own life program. Millions of years pass. Programs do not change, either for earthly creations or for heaven. Tell me, or answer yourself, people, what kind of program God created for man? How much does human life correspond to the modern divine program? Wow, how amazing, exclaimed Boris. This is an interesting task for programmers around the world, to recognize the divine program of human life. If someone can do this, they will be able to understand their true capabilities, abilities, their mission. And I don't want to live according to anyone's program like a robot, Katya said. Mom wrote me a schedule for the day and hung it on the wall. It says when I should wake up, when to do my homework, when to go for a walk, when to have lunch. I don't like my mother's program, and the divine program may not like it. You are still small, Katya, and you do not understand. Any program, even made by a great programmer, can be improved. But for this, you need to know, understand how it works, understand the consequences the changes will lead to, Boris answered the girl. His peers, clearly familiar with programming, began to approach Boris and enthusiastically talk about the future divine program. Perhaps the girls living under this program will become much more beautiful. Yes, they will surely be beautiful and smart goddesses. I think it's better not to introduce girls to the divine program. Why? They will become inaccessible, proud. So we guys will be different too, perhaps smarter than them. It doesn't matter which of us will be a little smarter. I am interested to see how the young gods in love with each other can create their ancestral estate. Their estate, of course, will appear divine. But then the whole earth, our planet, will appear divine. And the people who live on it will be 10 times smarter and prettier and healthier. Not at 10. Perhaps we will see more, truly see what people should be. And what happens? Now all developed countries are spending huge resources, intellectual potential, in order to launch rockets to other planets. They're trying to study them, not fully understanding the capabilities of their planet. Myself not understanding to the end. We need to get to work on the program faster. Let's create a working group. For such work, you need a super powerful computer with a huge database. Such computers, I think, do not exist yet. I subtracted from the science fiction writer Stanislav Lem the expression, "The universe is like a supercomputer." But now I understand this is not fiction, Boris said. Our universe is a biological supercomputer. But where is the keyboard? Where to learn? Which buttons to press? Where to begin? In the space next to each person this keyboard is. And you can mentally, without bothering your hands, press the button. In this case, a pure thought should be, and be inspired and rush quickly. Theodorite entered into the conversation. And to the question with where to start, I can answer, first, you need to improve yourself. You need to start with a diet. With a diet? What diet? Boris asked in surprise. There are many of them on the internet. Mum often asks her to print another diet on her printer. And there are many different diets in books. Where do you need to start? You're right, Boris. There are many diets. There is one. It is made up for man by God. Where can I read about it? It is in you and in every living person on the earth. It is only worth invoking, reflecting on logic, and you can realize and agree with the obvious. Spring. Almost simultaneously, all of nature comes to life, and on the trees, the buds are poured and leaves are straightened out of them. Many grass blades calmly green. Among the blades of grass, as if he is the best, the dandelion stands out for its bright yellow colour. Its flower is made up of rays coming from the sun, attracts the bee to itself. As if in the sun, a bee sits on a flower, sits down knowing he will fully give her his life-giving nectar, pollen. Brood will feed young bees from them. The genus will last. The bee knows all this and hastily carries nectar into its bee family, pollen from the beautiful flower. Only a dandelion flower. He could tell a lot about a man. How he can heal from infertility, how he can blood cleanse, how it can help the heart and create harmony in the flesh and calm the soul. But a dandelion flower, similar to the sun, cannot speak in words. Moreover, he cannot understand why people neglect his gifts and people call him a weed. After all, a small bee repeatedly shows it to all people by its deed. Its gifts are capable of creating harmony in the flesh and prolonging the race. In sorrow, many flowers fade, similar to the sun not fulfilling their mission. They will bloom again in the new spring with the hope that a person will know their significance. And what does science say about dandelion? Your centre can report, asked Boris. Victor immediately answered everyone. In official medicine, dandelion roots were used as bitterness to stimulate appetite, as a choleretic agent for diseases of the liver, gallbladder, gallstone disease, jaundice, to improve the activity of the alimentary canal, for gastritis, colitis, hemorrhoids, as a mild laxative for chronic constipation.